Hi, everyone. How are y'all? Happy Pride Month. Thank you for coming. I'm Jenna Weiss. I'm Student Life Coordinator from Coleman College. Also with us today are other Student Life Coordinators, Dominique Brown from Northwest, Armando Galvan Cruces from Southeast, Regina Wilson from Southwest, Ashley Rhodes from Northeast, and Carl Hayes from Central. We're all here today, hoping you enjoy this presentation. We really want you to learn from this presentation. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A throughout the event. We will try and answer as many as possible during the Q&A session. If there's a term or acronym you do not know, please ask and we'll explain it. We have a wonderful guest today. He is the Associate Director of Admission and Coordinator of Transfer Admissions at Rice University. In addition to his day job, he is a community activist and sociologist dedicated to issues related to the intersections of race, gender, and sexual orientation. He has conducted research on effemophobia, the negativity related to effeminate gay men. His work has been featured in GLAAD Media Award-winning article, and he has presented his work at national conferences such as the National LGBTQ Task Force Creating Change and NBJC's Out on the Hill. He is a lead organizer with Black Lives Matter in Houston, co-chapter director of New Leaders Council in Houston, screening committee and education and advocacy chair of the Houston LGBT Political Caucus. He's also the research coordinator for the mayor's LGBTQ advisory board. Please welcome Brandon Mack.
Thank you so much, Jana, and thank you to everyone with the HCC Student Life team for having me. I'm very grateful and very happy to be in this space. And once again, happy Pride Month to everybody. Once again, my name is Brandon Mack, and I'll go a little bit more into myself throughout the presentation. I definitely want to encourage everyone to ask as many questions as possible. Not only do I want you to learn from me, I also want to learn from you. So I really want this to be a dialogue in this space. So my remarks are going to focus on the intersection of Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQIA plus movement. So to just give everyone an overview of what I'm going to talk about for this afternoon, first I'm going to start off with an acknowledgement and dedication of this presentation. I'll talk a little bit about myself and how I'm coming into this space. We'll go through some history lessons on how we got to where we are. We'll definitely talk about intersectionality, the Black Lives Matter movement, where we are in terms of our current movement and moment, and what can you do as a person to contribute to what we are seeing in this country. And then afterwards, we're going to have a talk. We're going to definitely have some questions and some answers. But first and foremost, I want to acknowledge where we are at this very moment in terms of our community and in terms of our world, and also dedicate this presentation to the lives of too many beautiful souls that we unfortunately have lost. So we are in a very difficult time in this country right now with COVID-19 disproportionately impacting Black people. 7 incidences of police-involved killings here in the city of Houston. But our trans family is feeling all of this, and especially the death of 14 trans persons this year that we know of. I want to dedicate this presentation to the memories of Tony McDade, Dominique Remy Fells, and Rhea Milton, and too many beautiful trans lives that we have lost to violence, and we will continue to seek justice for them and justice for all the Black people that we have lost. So in terms of who I am and what I bring into this space, I have been involved in activism for over 12 years. And I've been involved in a variety of different spaces. And it's very important for us all to know the positionality of what we bring to this work, because we don't bring ourselves in isolation. We bring all of ourselves into activism work. So I want to acknowledge all the different positions that I'm bringing. So I have been a part of Black Lives Matter for a number of years now. I'm a lead organizer in Black Lives Matter Houston. I'm a part of the Houston GLBT Political Caucus, which is one of the oldest civil rights organizations in the Southwest. Specifically for that organization, I am the chair for the screening committee, and I'm also one of the co-chairs for education and advocacy. I'm also a part of New Leaders Council Houston, which is one of the largest training organizations for progressive leaders. I'm working on a doctorate in higher education leadership and policy studies, and my research is specifically focusing on LGBTQ plus support services within higher education. I am a college admission director for Rice University. I also coordinate the transfer admission process. So if anyone ever has any questions about transfer admission, if it is to Rice or any other college or university, I am here to help. So education access and education equity is also very, very important to me. But ultimately, what I bring into this space is me being fully who I am. I am unapologetically Black, same gender loving, gay. So we have to be who we are. And let me tell you, it has taken a time for me to get to where I'm at in my own life. And every single one of us is on a journey for our own sex self actualization. And that is important for you to acknowledge and to respect because it is not easy being ourselves, but it is necessary for us to be fully who we are because in order for our world to fully accept each and every one of us, we have to be our full authentic selves. And my authentic self does not prevent you from being your authentic self. You just need to respect me and where I'm coming from, just as I respect you and who and where you're coming from. Another thing that I also want to acknowledge is that it's important for us to acknowledge privileges. So I do have a cisgender male privilege. So I self-identify as male. I was born as male. So I will be speaking on the trans experience, but I want it to be known that I am an accomplice to the trans community. I am a comrade with the trans community, but I am not of the trans experience. So I just want that to be known in terms of my positionality with respect to that. But also, I am just a small town Texas guy. I grew up 50 miles south of here. I dealt with racism, dealt with homophobia, but I am here to tell you I am unapologetically who I am, and I'm going to impart some unapologetic lessons to you today through this discussion. So we're going to take it all the way back because it is important for us to take it all the way back. Because one of the things that I think that why we are seeing what we are seeing going on in this country is because of the fact that we are not acknowledging history. And as we all know, history is doomed to repeat itself unless we make intentional actions in order for it not to. And one of those things is we have to acknowledge history in its full authenticity, good, bad, and ugly. So one of the things that we have to talk about is slavery, that we as Black people were brought over to this country not on our own volition. It was because of economics. It was because we were viewed as property and not as people. And even back then, there were Black LGBTQ plus people. Now, we didn't necessarily have the names and the verbiage to acknowledge our sexuality or to acknowledge our gender orientation, but history has definitely shown that we have been there. So we have always been a part of the Black community, a part of the United States, and a part of our history, even from the very beginning when we were brought to this country. So that's very, very important for us to know. But one of the other things that it is important to know is we also have to acknowledge the history of law enforcement and its relation to Black people since the beginning of this country. So you see that star there that says Runaway Slave Patrol. Those literally were the first police officers that we had in this country. They were slave catchers. They did not view Black people as being fully human because we were considered to be property. We weren't even considered to be even a full human because we had the 3/5 compromise. And then even when we became full citizens of the United States, we didn't have the same rights. We weren't given the right to vote. We weren't given the right to protest. We weren't given these same basic rights, and we had to get to that point. But all along that, there has been a history of police and its interactions with Black people. And that interaction started with dehumanization and the fact that Black people were not equally valued and equally looked at as being full humans. So think about that history in comparison to what we're seeing now. There's been that consistent devaluation from the beginning all the way until now, which is the reason for why people are calling for a change in that system because that culture passes from one group to another and continues over the continuum. So that's the reason for why we're at where you see people asking for a devaluing or a change in the police system, because we have to change police culture, and that culture keeps reinforcing a devaluation of Black life. And it goes all the way back to the beginning of us as a people and a beginning of us here in the United States. Okay. So even though we have had this devaluation, we as Black people and Black LGBTQ people have always been fighting for our rights. We have been fighting for our rights as part of multiple movements throughout this country. One of those main movements, of course, the Civil Rights Movement. So the gentleman that you see pictured on the left is Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin is the architect of the March on Washington. He literally was the lead organizer who put the entire event together. He coordinated buses. He coordinated the speakers lineup. We would not have an I Have a Dream speech if it wasn't for Bayard Rustin. So it's important for us as LGBTQ plus people to know that we have had a hand in all of our movements and in all of our fights for freedom. When we think about the Black Panther Party movement, that was a movement in which Black people were asserting and taking care of each other. One of the lead people a part of that was Angela Davis. Angela Davis is a Black queer woman. So we have always been a part of our fight for our rights as part of the Black community, as part of the LGBTQ plus community, and a part of all these movements. So it is definitely something that we should be proud and draw strength from. One of the big things that came out as a result of the civil rights movement is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So as you can see on the graphic, you can see that the Civil Rights Act declares that no segregation in public places and no discrimination in employment based on race, gender, or national origin. Now, that Civil Rights Act of 1964 is going to be very, very important when we talk about one of our most recent victories that we've had as part of the LGBTQ rights movement. But think about it. We wouldn't have that act if it wasn't for the civil rights movement. So once again, you're seeing a connection between the civil rights and Black movement along with the LGBTQ plus rights movement, because they're all going to be interconnected. And so we have to continually fight for our rights collectively together, because it does benefit everyone when we collectively fight together. And the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is one of those products that really show what happens when we're fighting for collective liberation. So then we go to what we are celebrating in this beautiful month of Pride, the Stonewall riots. And yes, it was a riot. It is something to be proud of. It's not something to be ashamed of. We have to call it what it is. So what you see on the left is the historic Stonewall Inn. It still is in existence in New York City. When we get back open again, I highly encourage that you do go and visit the Stonewall Inn. It is an amazing experience to be there and to think about all the people who were involved in what has made our rights be who we are right now. So just to give a little setup of what happened during the Stonewall riots. So the Stonewall Inn is a bar. It is a bar where we collectively as an LGBTQ plus community come to gather together to be in community with one another. And on one of those nights, we were in community with one another, but the cops came in and were attempting to raid the Stonewall Inn. Unfortunately, there have been consistent raids up until that point, and mostly they were targeting Black and Latinx trans women. The two that you see pictured right there, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, literally threw the first shoe to start off the Stonewall riot. They were tired of being harassed. They were tired of being targeted by the police, and they decided that they were going to fight back. So literally, Marsha threw the first shoe. It touched on the riot, and you finally saw the LGBTQ plus community led by Black and Latinx trans women saying that they were no longer going to be subjugated to this negative treatment. They were no longer going to be the targets. So we stood up and fought back. This literally was the spark of our movement. And last year, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And just think of where we have come from there. And a lot of that is due to two trans women. We have to once again be mindful of that and respectful of our history, and that the most marginalized of us have always been standing up for our rights, have always been fighting for our collective liberation. And once again, we need to acknowledge and respect that history and thank our trans family for always standing in the gap for us, which means that we have a responsibility to also stand with them and make sure that they are also protected and get liberation as well. So then that leads us to where we currently are. So as you can see on the left, that is the Supreme Court. We have definitely had some amazing wins in the Supreme Court, from the Obergefell-Hodges decision that legalized same-sex marriage in this country, which happened in 2015, and then the most recent victory, which was Bostick versus Clayton County, Georgia in 2020. That particular decision has made it so that no one on the basis of race, gender identity, sexual orientation can be fired in terms of employment. And once again, we have that Civil Rights Act of 1964 to thank for why we have this current victory with respect to barring gender discrimination, barring gender identity discrimination, and barring sexual orientation discrimination. So once again, you can see that that's where the intersection of our movements come in, is in the fact that we have been fighting for civil rights as Black people, trying to centralize that once again, our Black lives do matter, but at the same time, we're also helping to give liberation to other communities, including the LGBTQ plus community. And then on the right, you see the three founders of Black Lives Matter, Patrice Khan Cullors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi. It's important to note that Patrice and Alicia are Black queer identified women. So this movement started because of Black LGBTQ plus people. So inherently, the Black Lives Matter movement has always been intersectional because we live intersectional lives. So we bring all of ourselves into this movement. We bring an attention to race. We bring an attention to gender identity. We bring an attention to sexual orientation, and those intersections are the lenses by which we are looking at our collective liberation and the lenses by which we are fighting for equality for everybody. So inherently, from history, we have always seen we have been a part of this country, we have been a part of this fight, and we continuously need to be a part of this fight, but we also have got to centralize who we are fighting for. Because even though we have been a part of this history, the devaluation of us as Black people has continued. The devaluation of us in terms of being LGBTQ plus people have continued. And right now in the year of 2020, when it's about vision, it's finally coming clear to some people that this needs to stop. And that is why we're fighting boldly, loudly, and proudly for this history to finally come to an end of negatively devaluing each and every one of us, and so that we can now start working on collective liberation for all people. So one of the big things that you've heard me talk about throughout this presentation thus far has been with respect to the issue of intersectionality. Intersectionality is a very, very important concept, and one that we need to always keep at the forefront of our mind, because none of us are any one single thing. We are a collection of all the different identities that make up who we are. So it's important to, of course, recognize and cite our sources. So intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Williams Crenshaw in 1989. She came up with this theory to really talk about the intersections of being a Black woman and how those intersections play out into her experience of the world. And at that particular time, she was talking about the relationship between the law and Black women. That theory has now, of course, been expanded to talk about all the different intersections that we bring. So if you see on the left, those are various different ways that we intersect. So our gender and our race intersect, our age intersects, it intersects with our religion, our class, our education, our sexuality, all the different things that make up who we are. And it is about the overlapping and intersecting social identities and the related systems of oppression, domination, or discrimination. So me as a Black gay man, I have a very, very different experience than someone who is white and also shares an LGBTQ plus identity. My race is going to make the situation very, very different than someone who may share my gender identity or someone who may share my sexual orientation. It is important to once again respect those differences, because the way in which I interact with the world is going to be very different because of my race. It doesn't get obscured. Many times I have had people who have said, oh, you pick one or the other. No, It is not a choice. I am fully who I am. I am Black 24/7. I am gay 24/7. One doesn't interfere with the other. One doesn't cancel the other out. I am fully who I am. So hence that's the reason why you have to respect all of that. One thing that I also find very interesting is we talk about this concept of the rainbow and how welcoming we are as a community, especially within the LGBTQ plus community. But there is still racism even within the LGBTQ plus community. And a lot of that happens because we're not respecting the intersections. We're not respecting that race is going to interact differently and that the racial issues that I deal with this country still exist even within the LGBTQ plus community. So we have to once again acknowledge and respect all of our intersections because, as the history lessons have showed, the oppressions are going to be connected. They're going to be unique. So of course, we have to respect the civil rights movement and its fight for Black liberation. But at the same time, we also have to acknowledge that it is going to be connected to the LGBTQ rights movement, but they can intersect together. But we also have to respect the uniqueness of our individual intersections and the combinations of those intersections. So it all once again comes down to respect. My Black life is important. Your LGBTQ life is important. Your religious life is important. The intersections of those are important, and they don't intercede and don't prevent any of us from living our lives and being respected and treated equally by each other and by all the systems that govern our society. So that's why it's very, very important that we acknowledge and understand intersections, but also respect intersections of all of us, because we are all living intersectional lives. So now I want to turn to talking about Black Lives Matter, because a lot of people have some confusion with respect to Black Lives Matter and what it is and what it isn't. So I want to make this very, very clear. Black Lives Matter started out as a hashtag. It started out as a hashtag largely in response to Trayvon Martin, Eric Brown, and other incidences that Michael Brown and Eric Garner and other incidences that we have seen with respect to police brutality. While it started out as a hashtag, it has definitely evolved into way much more than that. Black Lives Matter, in and of itself, is a simple declarative statement. It is not owned by one group. It is not owned by one person. It is a declarative statement that Black lives matter, period. There shouldn't be anything else that comes after that statement. Do not say Black Lives Matter, but do not say Black Lives Matter or nothing of that nature. It is a simple declarative statement. And the reason why we have to make that declarative statement is because Black lives have not equally mattered in this country. From the way that we started out with being considered as slaves, with the way that we started out being considered as property, with the way that we don't have equal access to resources, with the way that we still make less money for doing the same amount of work as someone else, with the same way that we are not valued equally in our interactions with law enforcement or even in our interactions with government. That is why we have to declare Black Lives Matter, because it is a way for making people know that we know our own lives matter, but also letting everyone else know that Black lives matter. Now, Black Lives Matter also is an organization, and Black Lives Matter it organizes in individual cities in very, very different ways. We do not have like a uniform, one chapter, one big umbrella Black Lives Matter organization, even though one exists. But Black Lives Matter can operate in your city in any way that it wants to operate. So we definitely encourage you to look up your Black Lives Matter chapter that is associated with your city, and it is operating in the way that is best for that particular city. So many people will sometimes come up to me and say, oh, I don't see you on the main website. That doesn't mean that the chapter and organization doesn't exist. It means that we are operating under Black Lives Matter for Houston, and we are doing what is best for the Houston community, irrespective of any other organization and irrespective of the way others organize. Because also, one of the things is that we want to operate and organize with respect to what is best for our community and not utilizing the same oppressive organizational structures that are structured under white supremacy and under a white lens, because we are operating once again from a Black perspective and a way that centers Black lives. So here in the Houston chapter, we have been in existence since 2017. We've been involved in Harvey recovery. We literally were filling in the gap when people couldn't get access to shelters. We were literally going in and gutting homes. We were providing cleaning supplies. We were providing food. We were providing shelter. We fill in the gap for our community. So we worked on food insecurity issues, school supply drives. We also lobby for policy changes with respect to what we see is going to benefit from the Black community. We host rallies, we host protests, we uplift the voices of the Black community and those who are the most marginalized. So once again, Black Lives Matter can function as an organization, but it's important for you to see how does it operate within your particular city. And then it is a movement. Black Lives Matter is a movement unto itself. It isn't about what is going on in this one particular moment or this one particular isolated incident. It's about continuously moving forward to where we are seeing the systematic changes that we need, to where we're seeing education becoming equal and equitable for all students, especially our Black and Brown students. It is where we are seeing attention being paid to LGBTQ plus lives, to where if we're being targeted and murdered, we are getting attention brought to our cases, and those cases are being solved. It is about economic equality and equity, to where Black people are making the same amount of money as someone who is non-Black for the same amount of work. It's about that. So you will see it under Lives, which is another organization, but it's also a movement, as well as Black Lives Matter. So it's important to know Black Lives Matter is all for these things. It is a hashtag. It's a declarative statement. It's an organization, and it is a movement. And anyone can be a part of this in terms of moving to making sure that Black lives are equally valued in this country. But it's important that you let Black people lead these movements. So one common thing that we will often see with respect to Black Lives Matter is the statement of all lives matter. And all lives matter is a problematic statement. And I hope that this particular cartoon will illustrate to you why it is problematic. So as you can see in the top left, you see a Black woman protester or a Black person, a protester, simply stating and protesting Black Lives Matter. And you see a white gentleman over here off to the side having a feeling about that. Then they come in with the all lives matter sign, and they simply say, no, all lives matter. You mean me, all lives. Then you see another person coming here saying, oh, thank God. They say, oh, thank God, I'm feeling a war zone and I'm living in a war zone. And then someone said, and then this guy says, no Muslims allowed, or can't you read? What I'm hoping this shows you is this. Once again, Black Lives Matter is a simple declarative statement. When someone says all lives matter, they're trying to demean our statement, and they're trying to fold us into a statement that is not true, because we have to say Black Lives Matter because we know and we see the experience and experience it every single day that Black lives do not matter equally as everybody else. So please do not use that statement because it demeans what we are trying to say. All lives matter won't matter until Black lives matter. Point blank and period. Is that we all have got to be a part of this, because when someone is trying to say all lives matter, they are being segregationists. They are trying to separate, and they're trying to not acknowledge the fact and the history of what goes on in this country and the treatment of us as Black people. So once again, please don't use that statement. Now, consequently, we have seen people who have asked us about the phrase, all Black lives matter. The reason why you're seeing this statement is because we want to acknowledge the inclusiveness of our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters family. So we want to make it known that trans lives matter, that Black trans lives matter, that Black lesbian lives matter, that Black gay lives matter, that Black bisexual lives matter, that Black pansexual lives matter, that every single person who is a sexual orientation minority and every single person who is a gender identity minority and is a part of the Black experience, that all of our lives collectively matter. And so we're having to make that statement to know that when we say all Black lives matter, we mean point blank and period that all Black lives matter. I'm not going to feel secure if my trans family isn't secure. I want to make sure that they have the same rights, privileges, access that I have. We're both of the Black experience. We both are Black people when we go out to this world. Black is the first thing that they see. But just because I have cisgender privilege doesn't mean that my life is any better than a trans person or any other LGBTQ plus person. We are all Black and we all matter. A phrase that we often hear is the phrase allyship. I am a person who believes that allyship is a weak paradigm and we need to move beyond allyship. Here's the reason why. An ally is someone who can step in and out of a fight. So when we're in the fight, your ally steps in, they help and assist. But when we're done, when the fight is over and I'm having to deal with either the win or the loss, the ally gets an ability to step out. And oftentimes, especially when we lose a fight, they step away and we're the ones who are left to clean up and deal with the remnants. What I advocate for is an accomplice or a comrade. An accomplice is going to be with you throughout the entire experience. If we win, they're with you. If we lose, they're with you. If we're going to jail, they're going to jail with you. So hence, that's why we have to have accomplices in this, is because when we lose, we still need to be together in that loss and come up with the way that we're going to achieve that win together. So hence, I'm telling everyone and I'm advocating for everyone, let's not be allies. We need accomplices. We need you to be equally in this fight with us. We need you to feel the same sense of loss, the same sense that you are a part of this fight and not just stepping in and stepping out. You got to be with us to the end till we reach that goal of full equality, full access, full equity for all Black lives. So here we are in terms of talking about our current movement. And many elements of our current movement are centering around George Floyd and what happened to George Floyd. So for those who are not aware, George Floyd unfortunately was murdered by a police officer in Minneapolis who literally put their knee on his neck and allowed him to lose his life senselessly. As a result of George Floyd, we of course have seen protests all around the world. And I want people to understand why we're seeing this particular moment. Think back to Eric Garner. Eric Garner was the man in New York City who also lost his life senselessly because a police officer decided to use an unauthorized chokehold. And you could literally see in the video him yelling, "I can't breathe." George Floyd also yelled, "I can't breathe." So what those particular two instances are connected are not only through the statement, it's also through the senselessness of a police officer using an illegal hold on a Black person and them declaring, "I can't breathe." We had the example of Eric Garner, and clearly we have not seen a change, because if there was a change, George Floyd would still be with us today. And it was worldwide news what happened to Eric Garner. So we can't think that police officers did not have an attention or knowledge of what happened in that situation. But and yet, here we are once again with a Black man yelling, pleading directly to people that they can't breathe, and an officer disregarding that call. That's why you're seeing what you're seeing right now. It's because we've seen too many of these examples. And even when it gets national attention, we're not seeing the change. So now people are saying we are going to see the change because we will not have this happen again. So part of that change is what the picture you see underneath George Floyd is the Minneapolis City Council. Andrea Jenkins, who you see pictured right here, is the vice president of the Minneapolis City Council, and she is the first Black trans person elected to office. And she sits on the city council along with Felipe Cunningham. He's a young Black gay man. So we are, once again, a part of this movement, but we're also a part of the current work that's being done. The Minneapolis City Council has recently decided that they're going to start to work to abolish their police system. So we're seeing many calls from around the world and around the United States for defunding the police and abolishing the police. I want to make it very, very clear by what people mean when they're calling for that. So when people are calling for a defunding of the police, what they are calling for is for those resources that are being allocated to the police and to police departments to be reallocated to other functions that can better support the community and better support society through social services. So, for example, many times when individuals are under distress with a mental health issue, it is not a social worker or a psychiatrist who is called out to deal with that person directly. It is often the police department that is going to be called out and is going to deal with that issue. Many of our police officers do not have training, do not know how to acknowledge that someone is under duress in a mental health issue. So, what do they use? They use their training. And that training is often escalation. It's going to be arresting the individual instead of trying to talk and deal with their specific mental health issue right then and there. But if we had more funds to be able to finance psychiatrists, social workers, individuals with those trainings and understanding to go directly there and deal with that particular issue, we would see more people who are alive today. How can you comply with a police order if someone is yelling, screaming, a gun in your face when you're dealing with a mental health issue and you have no idea why you're in that situation? Instead of someone who is a trained psychiatrist who has that ability and that mindset to know, oh, I need to approach this very differently in order to get this person the help that they need. That is why there's being a call for the defunding of police. Now, when it comes to the abolishment of the police system, once again, one of the reasons for why there's a call for that is to deal with what we talked about in the beginning, the history and the police culture that is embedded within police departments. That culture gets passed down from cop to cop to cop, and there needs to be an intersection in that police culture. Many times you hear people using saying that they're going to be blue over their race, meaning even if we do diversify our police officers, we're not changing that police culture. And even though you come from a Black or brown Latinx experience, you're still being taught police culture. And that police culture devaluates Black people, devaluates brown people, and gets learned and taken on by that police department, which is the reason for why we have to, some people are calling for an abolishment of that entire system so that we abolish culture and rebuild into a new culture that views lives equally and that approaches the way in which we handle each other very differently. So that's the reason for why you will see some of those different movements. I definitely encourage you to read up about those movements before making a commentary, because even if we do defund the police and even if we do abolish the police departments, there are still equitable ways in which we can use arms and protect ourselves that doesn't take on these devaluation cultures and this negative culture towards Black and brown bodies. But once again, the current system is not going to save us. The current system doesn't protect us. The current system barely even solves the cases in which police are involved in. But a new system with a new attention to how we view lives, with a new culture, could actually solve the issues that we have. So keep that in mind and be open-minded to the possibilities that there is something better than the current system that we currently have. So what does the current moment and movement look like? Because right now, as I like to say, we're having a moment, right? But this isn't a moment. This is a movement. These issues have happened and have consistently happened. So I like the fact that I see people are activated. They're out there taking photos at a protest. They're being involved. But my central question to you is, where are you going to be 6 months from now? I want to see that you're still activated. I want to see that you're still a part of this movement, because this is a movement. This isn't just a moment. It's about, are you still going to be there? And are you still going to do the things in which to make lives for Black people easier and that we're equally as valued? So this is going to take us addressing multiple issues because they're all, once again, connected. We got to fight educational inequalities. The fact that Black and brown schools get less funding than predominantly white schools is an issue that needs to be addressed. Economic injustice, as I mentioned throughout this presentation, Black people don't make the same amount of money for the work that they put in as our non-Black counterparts. We've got to get to that sense of equality and equity when it comes to economics. Food insecurity. Many Black people live in food deserts. Why do we not have access to quality food? Why do we need to invest in community gardens, in more supermarkets being in predominantly Black areas so that we deal with food insecurity? We got to address homelessness. Many times individuals do things because of lack. But if they don't have that lack, then they wouldn't engage in any of those activities. But we have to bring attention to our homeless population, treat them with dignity, and help them get a home. And then, of course, we got to deal with the racism even within our movements. You got to respect my Black experience just as I would respect your experience. You can't expect me to fight on behalf of you if you don't have an investment in my life. So we got to deal with the racism that we see in our own movements so that there is equity, so that we're all fighting together. And once again, it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. So I definitely advocate for people to participate in protests, in rallies, in marches, lobbying for efforts at the local, state, and national level. Have those tough conversations with other people, but it's going to take all of us working together. And please, don't privilege or suggest that one thing is better than the other. We all have different roles to play, and it is us all collectively playing those roles together that's going to make change. But don't say, oh, this one person is doing it better than you are, or this one person is saying it better than you are. We're all going to say things very differently and approach things differently, and we just need to respect the fact that we're all doing things differently and operating differently, but collectively our work together is going to lead to the change that we want to see. So in terms of what you can do as an individual, first and foremost, listen, listen, listen. This is a moment in which Black voices are being elevated and raised, and it is time for us to listen and take heed of what is being said. So please listen, hear the experiences. For our non-Black folk, have the conversations and educate your fellow non-Black people. We are not your textbooks. We are here to help educate, but it is not our job. It really is more helpful with you being someone who is of a non-Black experience, educating your fellow non-Black person on why Black Lives Matter, on how to be an anti-racist, because they're going to take it better from you because you have that personal connection and because you share some of those identities. So please make sure that you're having those tough conversations, but don't rely on us to be the ones to do it. Advocate and raise your voice. You, as a citizen, have the right to protest. You have freedom of speech. Use it. Raise your voices at those city council meetings. Raise your voices at commissioner court. Raise your voice in front of the Texas legislature. There are ways for you to always raise and elevate your voice. Don't wait for a charismatic leader. You are the leader. You are the one that we have been waiting for. So you know what you want. You know what you want to advocate for. Be confident in your own experiences and in your own voice, and you be the leader. And don't wait for someone else. You can do it. Don't co-opt. Don't co-opt. What I mean by that is Black Lives Matter is a Black queer-led movement, and that is the intention. So if you're someone of not that experience, you can assist, but don't come in and tell people what they should or shouldn't be doing, and don't try to put in structures that are based off of white supremacy and the white gaze into a structure that is not yours. So don't co-opt. And ultimately, take care of yourself. Self-care is a revolutionary act, as Audre Lorde teaches us, and it is important because we need you in this fight, but you got to take care of yourself to be in this fight. So I definitely encourage every single one of you to take care of yourself. So if you ever want to get in contact with me, and hopefully you have enjoyed this presentation and talk, you can always feel free to hit me up directly. My Twitter is @TheBrandonMack, as well as my Instagram. If you ever need to contact us at Black Lives Matter Houston, you can always email us directly, blmhou@gmail.com. My personal email address, brandon.d.mac@gmail.com. If you want to talk, rant, rave, all that, I am open to all of that. So always feel free to contact me in person. I also want to leave y'all with some resources. So we are very blessed to have Monica Roberts, who is an amazing advocate, activist, all around beautiful, angelic troublemaker here in the city of Houston. She operates a wonderful website called Transgrio. Definitely encourage you to read that. You can also go to our website, which is blmhouston.com. And tonight at 7 o'clock on ABC 13, there is going to be a conversation called Say Her Name, Violence Against Our Transgender Community, that's going to feature Haley Sherrard, Dominique Jackson, and Angelica Ross from the TV show Pose. So I definitely encourage you to check that out on ABC 13. And with that, I will open up the floor to questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to talk about.
Thank you so much, Brendan. And before we move on to our Q&A, we would like to thank you for your presentation. We were so delighted to have you here and how you clearly explained the intersection of both movements. For our students are in the chat, also we are recording the presentation for future use. So don't worry about it. We're going to deliver that presentation. And if you want to join any of our LGBTQ plus clubs and orgs, please go to our hcc./studentlife to get more information on how to join those. And now we're going to move for some questions. I hope you're ready for those. Let me see what we have here. So the first question we have from our students, you talk about be your authentic self. What advice will you provide to our students that are developing their authenticity?
Sure. So my definite thing that I want to impart in terms of all of us who are trying to be our authentic selves, first and foremost, give yourself grace and space. What I mean by grace is you're going to make mistakes. That is perfectly fine to make mistakes because none of us are perfect. So give yourself that grace to try out different things to get a real sense of who it is that you are, because experience can be our greatest teachers. So you got to give yourself those experiences to really get a sense of who you are. But then also give yourself space, which means you may need to do this alone. You may need to do this with other people, but still give yourself that space to really figure out who it is and who you are. So that was number one. Number two, talk to different people. It is through our collective experiences that we learn a lot about ourselves. So if you don't have access to LGBTQ people in your own immediate area, seek out ways that you maybe can interact with people online. There are a lot of virtual groups out there nowadays that definitely allow people to facilitate conversations. And it is through a lot of those conversations that you can get knowledge about yourself, right? Definitely, there's a lot of books out there also. I'm a big fan of books because you learn a lot from each other's experiences. So that's another way of getting insight into those experiences. So experience is probably going to be your best teacher. And it's about giving yourself access to all those different experiences to help you figure out ultimately who you are. But also, don't apologize. You have no reason to apologize for your existence ever. Be your full self. And that also helps in terms of you getting into who you are. Because if you stop apologizing, trust me, they'll accept. And if they don't accept, they're not supposed to be in your life anyway.
Thank you so much for that response, Brandon. Our next question is, you discussed about coordination and organizing. Based on your experience, what will be the best way for young leaders to coordinate and organize?
Oh, great question. So first and foremost, you want to identify what is the central issue, right? What is the central issue that you want to work on? And then think up of your own ideas and what you want to advocate for. After that, it's a matter of getting to know those other people who want to organize with you. So for example, with Black Lives Matter, one of the main things that we do is that each one of us who are organized, we all have different areas that we are passionate about, and we share our ideas with each other because we all fundamentally are working together towards liberation for Black people. So I might focus on LGBTQ plus rights, another organizer may be focusing on food insecurity, but we're talking about different ways that we want to advocate and learning from each other, but also working in tandem with each other. So first and foremost, it's about finding what is your particular passion, maybe seeing what existing organizations are out there, other people who you can connect with who share your passion for those central ideas, and then you developing the ways and approaches that you want to do that and working with other people in order to do that. As I mentioned in my presentation, don't wait for anyone. You don't got to wait for an organization. It's good to use those resources and things of that nature, but you also have the power to be able to do that by elevating your own voice and using those systems to infiltrate and make change.
Thank you. That's awesome. So our next question, that it's a short question, but I think it's extremely important. What is LGBTQ plus?
Sure, thank you. I know there is a lot of jargon. So LGBTQ plus stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning or queer for the Q, intersex for the I, and then allies for the A. The plus is because there's a lot of different evolving sexual orientation identities and gender identities. So the plus is making sure that we are adding all of that. We are inclusive of all of that. So other sexual orientation minorities are pansexual, demisexual, asexual. Those can also be included. And then in terms of gender identities, you have our non-binary, genderqueer. So we want to be inclusive of all gender and sexual orientation minorities.
Thank you for that response. I think we have a couple more questions. The next one will be, during the history lesson slides, you mentioned that we have a responsibility to stand with each other's cause. How students learn more about ways to support Black and LGBTQ plus communities?
Could you read that one more time, just because I want to make sure I'm inclusive of everything?
That's good. How students learn more about ways to support Black and LGBTQ plus communities?
Excellent. So best way, honestly, is to look up the organizations that you know of that are working in those spaces, and they're going to definitely tell you about ways to support. So for example, Black Lives Matter Houston, we have an active social media in terms of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, not as much, but we definitely put information out there, and we talk about ways in which people can support what we're doing. We talk about issues and the ways that you can address them on a local, county, and statewide level, and you can get involved in that way. LGBT organizations the same way. They tell you about ways for you to donate, ways for you to volunteer, ways for you to advocate. So that information is out there. You just got to be just go and search for it. One of the best ways, of course, is going through some of those organizations, and also they'll connect you to other resources. And also ask your friends. Ask your community, ask the people who you know intimately. They'll also tell you about ways that you can get involved and be supportive.
Awesome. Thank you for that response. And I think we have one or two more questions. It goes through the previous one, but it's more specific. We have several students that want to join movements and groups, and they don't know where to start, where they can start.
Sure. So one way you can start, you can contact me. I'm happy to help connect you to different ways. That's the other thing. Contact the people who you see that are involved and let them know, how do you want to get involved? And trust me, they'll be able to point you to a lot of different ways to get involved because there's so much work here. Also, first and foremost, like I said, think about what the change that you want to see. And then think about the ways in which you want to get involved, because you might be exactly what is needed, right? And you don't need an organization or anything of that nature. You just need to get started, right? So I definitely tell people, write, get your ideas out there. That's a great way of getting started, because you're going to find other people who are supportive of your ideas, and they may be the person who's going to provide you with that seed money and resources to get to that next level of change, right? So there's a variety of different ways. Start off by asking those of us who are actively involved. We'll help connect you. Look out for those organizations, but also you can get your own self involved, right? By thinking about those ideas and then pitching those ideas and ways to start it up.
Thank you so much
People
for
are
that.
asking for my email address again. So let me go back to my slide. There you go. My contact information in case you want to reach out to me.
Awesome. Also, we have another one here. Where do you find more information / explanation about LGBTQ P plus history and meaning?
Okay, great question. So there's a variety of resources out there. First and foremost, I'm a good person. I love a library. Love a good library. There's a lot of wonderful sections that you can find in terms of LGBTQ plus history. Transgrio, the website that I put for Monica Roberts, she puts a lot of information about trans history there as well. Netflix, for all of you wonderful people who have those streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, all of them are showcasing and highlighting both Black stories as well as LGBTQ plus stories because of it being Pride Month. There's some amazing documentaries out there. I definitely want to highlight Netflix's documentary called Disclosure. It's about the trans experience, and it's a great documentary. Someone just put in Hatch for the Montrose Center, also a great organization to lead as well. So yeah, there's a lot of resources out there and a lot of different mediums in which you can provide this information.
Thank you so much. We have 2 more questions.
Go for
What
it.
are some ways faculty staff can support students who are transitioning?
Excellent question. So for my faculty and staff members, first and foremost, respect pronouns. Okay, don't assume. Ask somebody their pronouns, and then once you know them, keep using them. Okay, and it's always about the way in which you approach somebody, right? So approach somebody with respect. If you make a mistake, acknowledge that you made a mistake, but that you're trying to work to correct that. So once again, first and foremost, respecting pronouns. Okay, they, them, he, him, she, hers, zir, all the different pronouns. Respect whatever pronoun someone has. 2, I'm a very big proponent that we try to change the ways in which we allow students to transition. So if a student has a name change, of course, respect the new name that they have, but also change their records so that way it is reflective of who they are, because that's also going to be very, very important. So that's a way. And then 3rd, don't be afraid to ask questions, but once again, it is about asking them from a place of respect and a place for better supporting somebody. So it's not going to be in a demanding tone or a aggressive tone. Literally have a conversation with that student saying, I would like to help. I am here to help. What are the ways that I can best support you? And then go from there.
Thank you so much. And our final question, can you recommend a place or group to join the fight against education inequalities?
Sure. So in terms of fighting educational inequalities, there's a variety of different groups that are out there that I would recommend. One group that comes to mind is an overall progressive group here in Houston called Indivisible Houston. They do have individuals who are working specifically on addressing educational inequalities. You can always join us at Black Lives Matter Houston. We definitely work with respect to addressing educational inequalities within HISD and all surrounding districts. Those would be at least the 2 main groups that I know of. But once again, if you feel free to contact me, I can connect you with some of the ones that I hear about.
Awesome, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for the presentation. It has been enlightening. We enjoyed so much. We appreciate your time. Thank you. And also for our students that want to join LGBTQ plus clubs and groups, please visit our HCC Student Life website or email us at hcc.studentlife@hccs.edu if you would like to join any of those organizations. Again, thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you, everybody. Happy Pride. Black Lives Matter.